Hi, you guys. I am back for the ratification debate and the origin of the Bill of Rights. And so let's get started, all right? So first we'll talk about the two, I don't like to call them quite political parties yet, but that's fine. The two political parties that exist at this time. We have the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. So the Federalists really favored a strong national government. They support the ratification of the Constitution. In order for the Constitution to go into effect, 9 states have to approve it. So it's not unanimous, but 9 states have to approve the Constitution in order for it to go into effect. And so we have the Federalists who support this Constitution. They support ratifying the national government. They are formed, I would say, after the publication, or I would say maybe during the publication of the Federalist Papers. So the Federalist Papers are written in 1788, and they are a series of 85 essays in support of constitutional ratification, okay? Again, the Federalist Papers are a series of 85 essays that are in favor of constitutional ratification. Federalists support having a strong national government because they really want to, assuage, they're really trying to assuage this American fear of political power. They're trying to make Americans feel better about their being, I would say, a very powerful center of government. They believe that government or that society gains its support and that it runs most effectively when people obey just laws, when people obey these laws and are orderly and such. The Anti-Federalists, however, don't support the ratification of the Constitution because they believe that it gives too much power to the federal government. They believe that government is best when the power is at the local and state level as opposed to the national level. They also oppose the ratification of the Constitution because it doesn't protect any individual rights. There's no Bill of Rights yet. There are no amendments. And a lot of people are pretty surprised when I say this. They're like, what do you mean there are no amendments? Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, the right to bear arms, the right against unreasonable search and seizure, or against cruel and unusual punishment. None of these things are in the Constitution. They're added much later because that's what an amendment is. When we break it down to its simplest form and you say, what is an amendment? An amendment is a change. If you guys were to write a paper and send it to me before it was due and say, could you please amend anything? Or you can make amendments to my paper, it means that you can make changes to my paper, right? So because our Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, they weren't added. So there's no freedom of speech, religion, press, and that was very frightening to Anti-Federalists, who will include like Thomas Jefferson, for example, right? And they really feared that if the government had too much power, that they would easily fall under the sway of merchants and others who were hostile to the interests of ordinary Americans. They simply felt that the government could be paid off, and they would fall under the sway of these merchants who have money, right? But by mid-1778, the required 9 states had ratified the Constitution. And so against the will of the Anti-Federalists, the Constitution goes into effect. But one of the first things that happens after this is that we have to get a Bill of Rights because we have to offer a definition of these inalienable rights that Thomas Jefferson drafted in the Declaration of Independence. It can't just be life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. How about the right to speak freely? Or the right to practice my religion freely? And so we have to offer a definition of of inalienable rights. And so that's what our Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments of the Constitution, do. They give us a definition of rights that should not be taken away. So the First Amendment actually offers 5 separate rights. The First Amendment offers the freedom of speech, religion, press, assembly, and petition. The Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. Now, this was very important because, remember, prior to the War of Independence, prior to there being a constitutional army, or a continental army, there were militiamen. And these militiamen were regular, ordinary citizens who took their weapons and went out and fought. So it's important to have a right to bear arms if you ever need to fight. The Third Amendment says individual citizens should not be forced to quarter soldiers in their homes. Now, this should sound familiar. If we go back to the Intolerable Acts, one of the Intolerable Acts is that Americans were forced to quarter British soldiers in their homes. So in creating the Bill of Rights, they wanted to ensure that this wouldn't happen again. And so the Third Amendment says that no American citizen can be forced to quarter soldiers in their home. The Fourth Amendment says that is the freedom from unreasonable search and seizure. So you can't be searched and nothing can be taken from your person without there being a reason for it. There has to be a reason or evidence or something like that. You see what I'm saying? Also, okay, number 5, this one is my favorite and it makes me wish I was in person because I give the best story, but I don't know if I can do this on YouTube because of copywriting issues. But the Fifth Amendment gives us the right to due process, freedom from self-incrimination, as well as double jeopardy. So I don't know, I wish I could post some videos, but I cannot. But those of you know, you were not born when Chappelle's show came on. Some of you were, but were too young to watch it. But in the case where he says, I plead the fifth, that is if, let's say you're on trial and you're not on trial. Let's say you are a character witness for someone and you're trying to say that your friend is of great character. Now, when you're on the stand, you can't lie because you take an oath not to lie. You say that when I'm on this stand, everything that comes out of my mouth is going to be truthful. If you lie, that's a federal offense called perjury. However, let's say you commit a crime and they ask you about that crime. You may not want to answer that because you could go to jail for admitting that you committed a crime. So instead of admitting it, you can just say, I plead the fifth, or I am going to invoke my right to not get myself in trouble. It is the right against, or the freedom from, self-incrimination, meaning you have a right to not get yourself in trouble. Now, double jeopardy. This is a good one. If you want an incredibly extreme example of double jeopardy, there is a movie by the same name that just so happens to be on Netflix. So if you watch that movie, I'll say this, you watch that movie, if you send me an email about this movie and how it relates to double jeopardy, I'll give you 5 points on your last quiz. All right, let's see how many people actually do it. Double jeopardy simply means that you can't be charged with the exact same crime twice. So if you've been charged with murdering your husband, and his name is Bobby Jean, you cannot be accused of murdering Bobby Jean again because Bobby Jean is supposed to already be dead. You cannot murder someone twice. So that's what double jeopardy protects against. All right, the Sixth Amendment is right to a speedy trial. Now, especially now in the era of COVID, right to a speedy trial is relative because what is speedy? It doesn't necessarily define what speedy is. And right now, there is no speedy trial. Everything is pushed back. But under normal circumstances, right to a speedy trial is one of your constitutional, or I would say unalienable, rights. Number 7, the Seventh Amendment is the right to have a trial by jury in civil cases involving money. This could be a benefit. You can either have a jury trial where a jury of your peers will be chosen and they will make a unanimous decision about your fate, or you could have a single judge who will decide your fate, whether guilty or not guilty. So the Seventh Amendment gives you the right to have a trial by jury. So you can have your peers who are supposed to be more representative of you. Those people would be the ones who would stand in judgment of you. The Eighth Amendment is a goodie. I really like this one as well. The Eighth Amendment says that there should be no cruel or unusual punishment or unreasonable bail. So this means that the punishment that you have has to fit the crime as well as the bail. You can't have an extremely high bail for a minor offense, right? So let's say that one of you guys goes to your local pharmacy, and because you have a hot date and you want to look your best, you decide to get some nail polish. Well, if you know, the good nail polishes are quite expensive and you may not want to pay $10 for a bottle of nail polish. So you swipe it, you take it. Now, if you're arrested, if your bail is like $100,000, you have your Eighth Amendment rights have been violated because the bail has to fit the crime. The punishment has to fit the crime. Do not go out and steal anything, you guys. Not a good thing. I am not telling you to steal anything, okay? Am I covered? I'm covered. Okay. The Ninth Amendment says that people do have rights that aren't necessarily listed in the Constitution. We know that the Constitution can be vague. So people have rights that are not listed in the Constitution. And finally, the 10th Amendment says that power that is not given to the federal government belongs to the states, okay? So one question that I ask in your PowerPoint is, what amendments stem from past British regulations? Look through these amendments and see if any of these, other than the third, sound familiar. So moving on, now that we have this Bill of Rights, it still doesn't mean that we have a united America or a united states, right? The colonial population is pretty heavily divided. It's divided by ethnicity, it's divided by religion, as well as class and status. And the revolution, while we're still divided, the revolution does help to create a national identity. It helps to create an American people. Now, the Constitution identifies three populations of people in the United States. Of course, the first are the people. The people refers to people who are entitled, or those who are entitled to American freedom. It also refers to Indians. Native Americans are treated as members of independent tribes, but they're not a part of the American political body. What does that mean when I say they're not a part of the American political body? It means that they don't have the power to create legislation, to vote in these elections at this time, right? It also mentions other persons, and by other persons, we mean enslaved people. So now that we have this new nation, do things change for Native Americans in this new nation? No, not really. They will continue to fight westward expansion. They will continue to fight white encroachment. The government will actually encourage westward expansion. And this encouragement of westward expansion has a few implications. It implies that Native Americans are going to be removed even further west because you're encouraging people to pick up and move and claim this land. So by them encouraging this westward expansion, it gives this implication that Native Americans are either going to be removed, that they are going to disappear, or that they will eventually be incorporated into white society with the expectation of assimilation. However, at this time, Native Americans are seen by many colonial Americans as unfit for citizenship. So because of this, tribes don't have any representation in government, and Congress will forbid the transfer of Indian land without federal approval, but the states will ignore this directive. So while Congress will say, look, you cannot transfer any of this land without coming to us first and getting approval, states will do it anyways. They will ignore the directive from the national government, from this new national government. And what about blacks in the Republic? What's going to happen to enslaved people, and what happens to free blacks in this nation? The black population by 1790 has exceeded the Native American population. Free blacks will enjoy some legal rights, but at this time, the majority of blacks in this nation are enslaved. In 1782, a man by the name of Hector St. John Crevecoeur will write something titled Letters from an American Farmer, and he will popularize the idea of America as the melting pot. However, in popularizing this idea, it really excludes blacks from the definition of an American people because they don't have the same rights. So how can it be a melting pot? Also, I've never really liked this analogy or this comparison of America as a melting pot. Melting pots, when I think of a melting pot, I think of like a tomato bisque or a tomato soup. I try to be bougie and call it a bisque, but we can call it a soup, right? So when I think about a tomato soup has more ingredients than just tomatoes, right? It could have cream in it. It could have basil and a number of other spices. But the major thing you taste is tomato, right? I like to think of America as more of a gumbo. It's one soup, but it's multiple ingredients, and each ingredient has its own particular flavor. It doesn't take away from the soup, it adds to the soup. But the crab is not overshadowed by the sausage, which is not overshadowed by the shrimp, which is not overshadowed by the okra. By the way, I don't like okra in my gumbo, but I digress. In 1790, Congress will issue something called the Naturalization Act of 1790. In this Naturalization Act, Congress will restrict the process of becoming a citizen from abroad to free white persons. So it says a lot, really, about the state of blacks, enslaved or free, in this nation. Is that even in who can be naturalized, who can be a citizen, the process of becoming a citizen from abroad is restricted to free white people. So it says a lot about who is a citizen of the United States, by who is allowed to become a citizen of the United States. So this chapter, I'm going to, in this, I will say for your work in this chapter, I will be kind of going off syllabus a little bit, and I'll come back with this lesson.